Welcome back, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about Michael Pramawat's 2006 top 30 world's top 32 Medicham Banette list. Now, when I covered Banette a few weeks ago, somebody in the comments brought up, "Hey, you should cover Banette Medicham." And personally, I've never been a huge fan of the deck, but it is kind of an interesting deck for the 2006 format, and I think it'd be a good video and have some good discussion on it. So starting off, we're going to take a look at Michael's list, and then we are going to take a look at a couple of variations of the deck that I've created. And once again, one of the things when we kind of analyze some of these decks from the past is that we're taking a look at it, but we have 15 years of hindsight to really analyze the deck and have that experience not only with the game, but also with the 2006 format in general. So there's some things where we might critique certain things here and there, but once again, we're able to do that only with some of the advantages we have today that Pramawat might not have had back then. And there's a lot of things that are just going to be my opinion on it as well, and people may or may not disagree with me, but hopefully you're watching the video because you want to hear my opinion on it. So starting off here, the reasons that I guess to really start off here, this is Michael Pramawat's deck list. He ended up in the top 32 of the world's 2006 championships. He ended up losing to a Meta Knight deck on time that didn't rush their turns, we'll say that. Or at least that's the story that I remember hearing back in the day, so don't quote me on that. But essentially, this was the secret deck for Worlds 2006. Some of the better players back in the day were high on the deck, and in theory, it sounds really, really good. You have Medicham EX here, where you can essentially, the idea is you open with Medicham EX, you spread damage counters, slow your opponent's setup using pure power, and then you can kind of transition into a Banette where you'll be taking a lot of cheap prizes, not only with Shady Move, but Shadow Chant. And then you've got some synergy there between placing the damage counters with Medicham and then moving them around with Shady Move. The problem with the deck is that's basically where the synergy ends. And there's a lot of conflicting points with the deck. Medicham likes to play a very, very slow control style deck. And you see this in the Medicham Houndoom deck that we featured on the channel a few months ago. Banette, on the other hand, likes to play a very fast, aggressive strategy. You just are going to try to overwhelm your opponent, rush them to 6 prizes, and just win the game before they really know what hit them. And you're just putting so much damage and so much pressure on the board, they're just not going to be able to find the responses to it. So when you put a very slow controlling Pokemon with a very fast aggressive Pokemon, that's a tough balance to make. Going along with that, they're both Pokemon that take energy to do something. And you can look at it and you're like, well, they just need 2 energy, but the 2006 format is also a format where cards do big damage for very little investment. And examples of this are going to be like LBS that have like Lugia EX, Latias Star, Bomb Tar, for example. And what you're going to find is it's not uncommon to fall behind in energy attachments. And if a deck like this ever falls behind in energy attachments, you just really can't get back out of that. Now, the deck had so many conflicting points of view, and it tried to play so many different cards. Pramawat had to make a lot of cuts, especially in his energy lineup here. And we see he's playing a very thin 10 energy. Typically, in any sort of turn 2 style deck, I like to play at least 14 or 15 energy because it's crucial you get that turn 1 energy drop. And essentially, you don't want to miss an energy drop, especially in the first 5 turns of the game. If you miss an energy drop in the first 5 turns of the game, your win percentage drops dramatically. Now, to offset this a little bit, Pram ended up playing some of these Holen's energy. So we played 2 Magnemite, a Cast Form. But going along with that, then that's a lot of bad openers. So to kind of offset that, he played 2 copies of Swoop Teleporter, which in theory makes sense, but it's once again, I'm not playing a ton of energy. I'm going to rely on these holding cards. I'm going to play these holding cards, so then I've got to play Swoop Teleporter. And it just gets to be a little conflicting. Now, that's not where some of the conflicts end. You basically have to play the Lunatone Soul Rock combo or Battle Frontier. Pram ended up playing both here because when you transition from Medicham into Banette, you're going to turn Pidgeot back on, and you can't give your opponent Pidgeot, so you've got to be able to counter the Pidgeot. But that's another example where a deck like just straight Medicham, like the Medicham Houndoom deck we featured, can get away without playing the Lunatone Soul Rock and can play arguably a better stadium in Cursed Stone than Battle Frontier. This you have to go the other direction on because you can't play Desert Ruins and you can't play Cursed Stone in the deck because Medicham takes damage from Desert and Banette takes damage from Cursed. Now, he also went with the 2 Lunatone and 1 Soul Rock. I've seen a lot of good players vouch for this, saying that the Lunatone in general is very good just for that moon guidance. It also slightly decreases your odds of prizing part of the combo, but generally speaking, in a deck like this, you want to get that first turn energy drop under a Shuppet or a Medite. You don't want to get that first turn energy drop underneath of a Lunatone. It just puts you a turn behind in a deck you really can't be a turn behind in. So personally, I've never been a huge fan of the higher Lunatone count, but like I said, I've seen a lot of really good players vouch for it or say they really like it. So going along with this, we see a few other distinctions in the deck. You see the 3 POW hand extension, and this is one of those things where if you're going like a heavy Medicham build, you want to play heavy POW, but it's kind of counterproductive because you might open up with Banette, and if you go Banette, you'll probably be ahead in prizes, so POW is not as good. And I'm not trashing on the POW hand extension. I think POW in general is very, very good, even in just a straight Banette deck, because there is going to be situations where you're behind and getting that free gust of wind effect is very strong, but it is one of those where it's a little bit counterproductive. The last comment I want to make is just when you're playing, both your attackers require energy to really do something. And I know we talked about this a little bit earlier, but that's one of the downsides is if you're playing a support Pokemon, like let's say a Houndoom, for example, where you're getting X benefit without really investing any sort of energy in it, so you can focus putting all your energy on, let's say, Medicham, while still getting the benefit of Houndoom without actually having to invest in it, that's going to be a lot stronger than a deck like this, where you've got to kind of invest your energy in Medicham and Banette. Now, I don't want it to come across like I'm trashing the deck, because I'm honestly not. But I think anytime that you're going to come in and try to deck build a format or deck build a deck, it's really important that you're very honest with yourself about like the strengths and weaknesses of the deck and how it's going to interact in the format. So when I was coming in and I knew those were the strengths and weaknesses of the deck, I really thought to myself, well, what do I want to focus on? How do I want to build this? And I think for me, one of the biggest things is I wanted to really try to make the deck a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more focused. I liked a lot of the things that Pram had in the deck, but I wanted to get rid of some of the conflicting cards and up the energy just so I had, I'm going to say, a higher chance of hitting those early turn energy drops and a higher chance of getting those energy drops under Pokemon that I actually want them under. So when I came in and I did the deck, this is the list that I used. Once again, very similar to Pram's. Concept is identical, but we went a different direction with a few things. So we went with a 3-3 Medicham, 3-3 Banette, same as Pram. We thinned the Pokemon line down to 1 Lunatone, 1 Soul Rock. So statistically speaking, 75% of our basics are going to be good openers. We want to hit that Medite, we want to hit that Shuppet. So those are all going to be strong openers. 6 out of our 8 are all good. And then I only went with the Holin's Magneton to avoid any of those bad starts from like Holin's Magnemite or Holin's Cast Form. This also freed up a couple of spots in the Pokemon or in that trainer lineup where we didn't have to play Swoop Teleporter. To offset this, I went with a much higher energy count, playing a total of 15 here. Which you could even argue is maybe a little high. Maybe I could get away with, like, let's say 14. But I wouldn't want to go below 14 here. When it came to the trainer lineup, I also made this pretty streamlined. I went with 4 Elms, 4 Admin. I feel like those are key. The 4 Elms is also what Pram had here. It's just so good to be able to search out those Pokemon in the second turn of the game. The 4 Admin, I think, are crucial in any sort of control deck like this, where we want to be putting that pressure on our opponent, and then anytime they're taking a knockout, we want to admin them to a lower hand size. Steven's Advice is just a very good draw card in general in the 2006 format. Players like to fill their bench a lot, especially against decks where they know they're going to get admin a lot. You don't really want to leave certain cards in your hand and then have it draw them off of a late game admin. And this was something that I did differ from Ramon, where he didn't play Steven's Advice at all. He was much more on the discarding cards, playing 2 copies of TV Reporter in there. I think the reason that I went with Stevens is I just want that higher draw. I felt like I had plenty of ways to discard supporters, and just getting those larger draws, especially off late game admins from my opponent or my own admin, is just going to be stronger in general. We went with your basic Hollands lineup here. Playing, we opted to play the Mentor and then the Scientist as well. I didn't play the Adventurer, which you could argue is a mistake in the deck, but this is something that a lot of I see good players do in the 2006 format. You opt to not play the Adventurer, you just go with the Mentor and Scientist. Those are ideally going to be the ones you want, but arguably we could probably drop, let's say, like a Warp Energy and go something like an Adventurer right there. That might actually be even better. Yeah, not typically that we're making last-minute changes to the deck when we're covering it, but just going with a Hollands lineup. 1 copy of Scott, you want to be able to search out those Battle Frontiers. Not only do you want to make sure that you're countering your opponent's Desert Ruins and Cursed Stone, but also locking out Pidgeot. As well, the advantage of Battle Frontier is it's also very good against Meta Knight, and arguably Battle Frontier is much better stadium than some of the other options we could run, but I don't like the fact that we're weak to literally the best 2 stadiums in the entire format. Went with 4 ER2. This is a pretty standard play for a lot of turn 2 style decks, just acknowledging the fact that we want to get ahead on energy drops, and just another way to slow our opponent down. Went with 2 copies of POW Hand Extension. We didn't play as heavily into it as Pram did, but those 2 copies, when we need them, we should hopefully be able to find them. 4 Rainbows. This also gives it a little bit easier for us with the deck to play both the Fighting and Psychic types, but also gives us an energy to move around with Shady Move. 2 Warp Energies. This is for decks like Mulock. It also helps us if we need to use more than 1 Shady Move in a single turn. 1 Cyclone Energy, a little bit more disruption. 6 Psychic, 1 Fighting. There's going to be times in the game where we want to Sky Kick, but typically speaking, we are just going to want a pure power. You could also argue just to play the 7 Psychic Energy over the 1 Fighting, just due to how rarely we're going to Sky Kick. Overall, this is a very similar concept to what Pram had, but it's much more streamlined, much more focused, and should have much more consistent gameplay. I've played probably 5 or 6 games with the deck. It works well. I mean, I don't really have anything bad to say about the deck. I think I won 3 out of the 5 games I played with it. But the weakness of the deck is essentially, I just don't really see a reason to play it. About every single game that I played with it, I'd much rather be playing like the Medicham control deck with Houndoom, or I'd much rather be playing Banette with some of the other options. Another deck we're going to talk about here in a minute. It just, putting these 2 together just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So if you're looking for a more updated Medicham Banette list, I would say this is about ideal. You can argue a few spots in there. I think Warp Point is probably the biggest one. 1 or 2 copies of Warp Point I think would be fantastic for the deck. Not only to give you a little bit more disruption, but also to give you a little bit more, I'm going to say opportunities if you do open with the Lunatone Soul Rock. Another option you could do is, instead of going 3-3, we just kind of hedged our bets here. I think if you really wanted to focus on one over the other, you could really just go 4-2 and go from there. I think a lot of the cards that Pram played, like Swoop Teleporter, are not bad cards. They were just a little too techy for some of the stuff that I wanted to play. So, like I said, I don't really have anything bad to say about Pram's list. We just streamlined our list a little bit and made it a little bit more focused. Some of the things I do feel pretty strongly about is I do think the 4 admin are an absolute must. I think those are absolutely essential, and I don't like playing this very heavy bad basic count here. Regardless if you want to play swoop or not, I think this is just very weak compared to just playing a higher energy count, but that's my 2 cents on it. The third option we're going to talk about here is something a little bit different, and what this is this is a Banette Eeveelutions deck. Now, the advantage of going something like this is you still have that very heavy Banette focus while having a support Pokemon in the Eeveelutions. Now, not only can they attack, but you can also get a benefit out of them without actually investing in them. And one of the things that I enjoy the most about this deck is that you can come in and you have a lot of synergy with Surprise Time Machine. Not only can you use it to try to reset your EVs to get another Jolteon or Espeon off, but you can also use it to reset Shady Move, get yourself out of special conditions, do multiple Shady Moves in a single turn, which, just saying it doesn't sound super strong, but essentially Surprise Time Machine with Banette X equals plus power. It's just basically a free plus power, and it's a free damage swap. Is it the most broken combo in the 2006 format? No, but it's a very cool combo to pull damage out of thin air that your opponent was not expecting. We got to play the 1 Lunatone, 1 Solrock in here as well. Just so key to shut down Pidgeot, Porygon 2, and then Macargo as well. 2 Holin's Magneton. I do like the Holin's energy in the deck. You have to play them, but it is much weaker to ER2, which does see a lot of play in this format. Went with 4 Elms, 4 Admin, 3 Stevens, 2 Mentor, 1 Adventurer, 1 Scientist, 1 Scott, 4 Transceiver, 4 Surprise Time Machine, 4 Battle Frontier, and then a very similar energy lineup. Playing a total of 14 energy here, going 4 Rainbow, 3 Warp, 6 Psychic, 1 Cyclone. You do have a little bit more synergy with Warp energy because you can switch back to a free retreater and then retreat back to whatever you had to warp out of the active spot. This is another deck. It struggles with a lot of the big dark decks in the format like Bombtar, but it does have pretty good matchups against a lot of the other decks in the format. I had great games against Frosty's LBS deck a couple days ago. Had a really good game against Meta Knight a few days ago as well. Just is it a tier 1 deck? No. It's probably a mid tier 2 deck to a high tier 3 deck. Same with Medicham Banette, probably a mid tier 2 deck, high tier 3 deck. They're fun decks to play. There's a lot of cool combinations you can do with them, but it's not going to revolutionize the format. But hopefully you enjoyed the video, and hopefully this gives you a little bit more insight into not only the mindset behind deck building, some of the decks in the 2006 format, but also behind some of Pram's card choices in his World's 2006 list, and maybe some of the updates that I would make for the more current format. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We are getting incredibly close to 500 subscribers, and that would be absolutely awesome to hit by the end of the year. So I'm hoping we'll get there, but need your help on that. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.